Please, just one last wish, the homeless man whispered. The millionaire's daughter froze. She had lived her whole life in mansions, with marble floors and chandeliers above her head. He had lived his whole life on the streets, with nothing but cold concrete under his back. Their worlds were never meant to meet until that moment. No one expected what she did next, and it changed everything. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Isabella Martinez had everything money could buy. At 22, she owned 3 luxury cars, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, and a trust fund that could feed a small country. Her father, Carlos Martinez, built his empire from nothing, turning a single construction company into a billion-dollar real estate dynasty. But success came with a price. Carlos worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, and rarely had time for his only daughter. Isabella tried to fill the emptiness with shopping sprees, expensive dinners, and parties that lasted until sunrise. She surrounded herself with people who called themselves friends, but only stayed for the champagne and designer gifts. Deep down, she knew something was missing. Her life felt hollow, like a beautiful painting with nothing underneath the surface. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Isabella's alarm buzzed at 10 a.m. in her marble bathroom. She had plans to meet her friend Sophia for brunch at the most expensive restaurant downtown. As she applied her makeup, her phone rang. It was her assistant, Maria. "Miss Martinez, your father wants to see you at the office immediately. He says it's urgent." Isabella sighed. Her father's urgent meetings usually meant another charity event, where she had to smile and pose for photographs. She threw on a designer dress, grabbed her purse, and drove her white Lamborghini through the busy streets. Carlos Martinez's office sat on the 50th floor of the tallest building in the city. When Isabella walked in, she found her father pacing behind his massive desk, his face more serious than usual. "Isabella, sit down. We need to talk." She settled into the leather chair across from him. "What's wrong, Papa?" Carlos pulled out a thick folder and placed it in front of her. "The Martinez Foundation needs a new director. Someone young, someone who understands what this family stands for." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Papa, you know I'm not good with business things. I don't know anything about running a foundation. That's exactly why you need to do this." Carlos's voice was firm but gentle. "You've lived your whole life taking from this world. It's time you learned what it means to give back. But I have plans, commitments. I can't just drop everything and become some charity worker." Her father's eyes softened. "Isabella, when I was your age, I had nothing. I slept in my car for 6 months while I built this company. I worked every day because I wanted to give you everything I never had. But I realize now that I gave you everything except purpose." Isabella stared at the folder without opening it. "What would I have to do?" "Start small. Visit the programs we fund. Meet the people we help. Learn what real problems look like." She picked up the folder reluctantly. "Fine, but just for a few weeks." That afternoon, Isabella found herself standing outside St. Mary's Community Center in the poorest part of the city. The building looked nothing like the places she usually visited. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and the parking lot had more holes than smooth pavement. Inside, she met Father Thomas, an elderly priest who had run the center for 20 years. His face lit up when she introduced herself. "Miss Martinez, we're honored to have you here. Your father's donations have kept our doors open for years." Father Thomas gave her a tour of the center. They had a food kitchen that served 300 meals a day, a shelter that housed 50 people each night, and a small medical clinic for those who couldn't afford health care. "We do what we can," Father Thomas explained, "but the need keeps growing. More people lose their homes every month. More families can't afford food." Isabella nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. She checked her phone constantly, thinking about the dinner reservation she had made for that evening. As they walked through the dining area, she noticed an old man sitting alone in the corner. He was probably in his 60s, with gray hair and clothes that had seen better days. Unlike the others, He wasn't eating. He just sat there, staring out the window with the saddest expression she had ever seen. "Who is that man?" Isabella asked. Father Thomas followed her gaze. "That's David. He's been coming here for about 2 months. Very quiet. Keeps to himself mostly. He used to be an engineer before he lost his job and his home." "What happened to him?" Father Thomas lowered his voice. "His wife died of cancer 3 years ago. He spent everything on her medical bills. When she passed away, he couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. Lost the house. Lost everything." Isabella felt something strange in her chest, a tightness she didn't recognize. "Has anyone tried to help him find work?" "We've tried, but it's difficult. Most companies don't want to hire someone his age, especially when he's been homeless for so long." As they continued the tour, Isabella kept glancing back at David. Something about his quiet dignity touched her in a way she couldn't explain. After the tour, Father Thomas walked her to the parking lot. "Miss Martinez, I hope you'll consider visiting us again. The people here could benefit from seeing that someone like you cares about their situation." Isabella promised she would return, though she wasn't sure she meant it. As she drove home in her Lamborghini, she couldn't stop thinking about David's face, the way he looked lost, even in a room full of people. That night, she couldn't concentrate on dinner with her friends. They talked about fashion and gossip and their latest vacations, but Isabella's mind kept drifting back to the community center. Over the next few days, she found excuses to visit St. Mary's again. She helped serve meals, sorted donated clothes, and slowly began talking to the people who came there for help. Each person had a story that broke her heart a little more. There was Maria, a single mother with 3 children who worked 2 jobs but still couldn't afford rent. There was Robert, a veteran who suffered from nightmares and couldn't hold down steady work. And there was David, who still sat alone in the corner, still staring out the window with that same sad expression. One afternoon, Isabella approached his table. "Mind if I sit here?" David looked up, surprised. "Of course, miss. Please." She sat down across from him. "I'm Isabella. I've been volunteering here for a few days. I'm David. Thank you for what you're doing here. These people need all the help they can get." His voice was soft, educated. She could hear the intelligence that Father Thomas had mentioned. "Father Thomas told me you used to be an engineer." David's eyes grew distant. "Seems like a lifetime ago now. I designed bridges, buildings, things that were supposed to last forever. Funny how nothing really lasts forever." Isabella didn't know what to say. She had never met anyone who had lost everything the way David had. "I'm sorry about your wife." David's face changed, becoming even sadder if that was possible. "Thank you. She was everything to me. When she got sick, I would have done anything to save her. Sold everything, spent every penny. In the end, it wasn't enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then David looked at her directly. "You don't belong here, do you? I mean, you're kind to come, but this isn't your world." Isabella felt her cheeks flush. "What makes you say that? Your clothes, your jewelry, the way you carry yourself? You come from money. Real money." She nodded slowly. "My father owns Martinez Construction. He thinks volunteering here will teach me something about life." "And has it?" Isabella considered the question. "Yes, actually. I'm learning that I don't know anything about real problems." David smiled for the first time since she had met him. "That's the beginning of wisdom, realizing what you don't know." Something about his gentle manner made Isabella want to keep talking. She found herself visiting the center every day, always making time to sit with David. He told her stories about his life before, about the bridges he had built and the places he had traveled with his wife. She told him about her loneliness, about feeling trapped in a world of luxury that felt meaningless. What Isabella didn't know was that David was carrying a secret, something that would soon change both of their lives forever. And what David didn't know was that Isabella was about to make a decision that would surprise everyone, including herself. As the days passed, their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Isabella began to see David not as a homeless man, but as a human being with dignity, intelligence, and a story worth hearing. And David began to see Isabella not as a spoiled rich girl, but as someone searching for meaning in a world that had given her everything except purpose. Neither of them realized that their unlikely friendship was about to be tested in ways they never imagined. The secret David carried was heavier than the weight of sleeping on cold concrete every night. Isabella noticed the change first in his eyes. They held something different now, something urgent that made her stomach tighten with worry. It was a Thursday afternoon when she found him sitting outside the community center instead of inside. He was leaning against the brick wall, his breathing shallow and labored. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool autumn air. "David, are you okay? You look pale." He tried to smile, but it came out weak and forced. "Just tired, Isabella. Old bones don't bounce back like they used to." But Isabella had learned to read people differently now. 3 weeks of volunteering had taught her to see beyond polite answers and fake smiles. David wasn't just tired. Something was wrong. She sat down beside him on the concrete steps. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I haven't been completely honest with you." "About what?" "About why I'm really here. About why I lost everything." Isabella's heart began to race. "David, you can tell me anything." He looked at her then, and she saw fear in his eyes. Real, raw fear that made her chest ache. "The cancer didn't just take my wife. It's taking me too." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "I have the same disease she had. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less." Isabella felt the world tilt around her. "That's impossible. You seem fine. You walk around, you talk normally, you eat." "That's the cruel thing about this disease. It hides until it's too late." My wife looked healthy right up until the last few weeks. Tears filled Isabella's eyes before she could stop them. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want your pity. I've had enough pity to last several lifetimes." She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "How long have you known?" "Since before I became homeless. The medical bills for my wife's treatment had already broken me financially. When I got my diagnosis, I couldn't afford treatment. I chose to spend her last months taking care of her instead of fighting a battle I couldn't win anyway." Isabella's mind raced. "But there are programs, assistance, ways to get help." David shook his head sadly. "Not for someone like me. Too old, too poor, too late. Besides, I've made my peace with it." "Number." Isabella's voice was firm, stronger than she had ever heard it. "No, you haven't made peace with anything. You're sitting here giving up." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." Isabella stood up abruptly, pacing in front of him. "My father has connections at every major hospital in the state. We can get you the best doctors, the best treatment." "With what money?" David's voice carried a bitter edge. "Your father's charity is generous, but it doesn't cover experimental cancer treatments that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars." "Then I'll pay for it myself." David stared at her in shock. "Isabella, you barely know me. I'm a homeless man you met 3 weeks ago. You're my friend. You're the first real friend I've had in years." The weight of her words hung between them. David's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Something I need to ask you, but it's not about money or treatments." "What is it?" David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather journal. "This belonged to my wife. She wrote in it every day for 30 years. Poems, thoughts, memories, dreams." He held the journal like it was made of glass. "Before she died, she made me promise something. She wanted me to find someone worthy, someone with a good heart, and give this to them. She said her words shouldn't die with us." Isabella looked at the journal, understanding slowly dawning on her face. She believed that stories have power, that they can change people. She wanted her words to live on, to maybe help someone else find meaning. David held the journal out to Isabella. "This is my last wish. Not treatment, not money, not a place to live. I want you to have this. I want you to carry her stories forward." Isabella's hands trembled as she reached for the journal. Why me? Because in 3 weeks, you've shown me more kindness than I've received in 3 years. Because you see people, really see them. Because you have the power to make her words matter. She opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with elegant handwriting in faded blue ink. She read a few lines at random. Today, David brought me flowers from our garden. Not because it's a special day, but because he knows they make me smile. Love isn't found in grand gestures. It's found in the small moments we choose to share. Isabella looked up at David, tears streaming down her face. This is beautiful. There are hundreds of entries like that. Love letters, observations about life, hopes for the future. She was the wisest person I ever knew. I can't take this. This is your wife's memory. David's voice was steady now, filled with quiet determination. My memory of her will die with me in a few months. But if you take this journal, if you share her words, then part of her lives forever. Isabella held the journal against her chest. What do you want me to do with it? Whatever feels right. Maybe publish it. Maybe just read it when you need wisdom. Maybe share pieces of it with people who need to hear what she had to say about love, loss, and hope. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the community center parking lot. Isabella realized this moment was changing her in ways she couldn't fully understand yet. David, I accept your last wish, but I have a condition. What's that? You have to help me figure out how to honor her properly. You have to tell me the stories behind the stories. David smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, it reached his eyes. I think I can manage that. They sat together as the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, the leather journal resting between them like a bridge connecting two worlds that were never supposed to meet. What Isabella didn't know was that accepting David's last wish would set in motion a series of events that would not only change her life, but touch the lives of thousands of people she had never met. And what David didn't know was that his wife's words were about to reach farther than either of them had ever imagined possible. The real story was just beginning. The next morning, Isabella woke up with David's wife's journal on her nightstand. She had read until 3 a.m, completely absorbed by the beautiful words written by a woman she had never met, but felt she was beginning to know. The entries painted a picture of a love story that had lasted 30 years. David's wife, whose name was Sarah, wrote about their first apartment with the leaky faucet and creaky floors. She wrote about dancing in their kitchen on Sunday mornings. She wrote about the day David proposed during a thunderstorm because he couldn't wait for perfect weather. But what struck Isabella most were Sarah's thoughts about purpose and meaning. In one entry, Sarah had written, "True wealth isn't measured in what we own, but in what we give. The richest people I know are those who make others feel valued." Isabella closed the journal and looked around her penthouse apartment. Everything was perfect, pristine, expensive, but for the first time, it felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with loneliness. She grabbed her phone and called her assistant. "Maria, cancel my appointments today. I need to spend time at the community center." When she arrived at St. Mary's, she found Father Thomas sorting through donated clothes. He looked up with surprise. "Isabella, you're here early today, and you look different somehow." "Different how?" "More focused. Like you found something you were looking for." Isabella held up Sarah's journal. "Father Thomas, I need to ask you something. If someone wanted to share beautiful writing with the world, how would they do it?" Father Thomas set down the clothes he was folding. "Are you talking about publishing something?" "Maybe. I'm not sure yet. But I have these incredible words that deserve to be heard." "Well, there are publishers, of course. But these days, people share stories in many ways. Social media, blogs, community events. What kind of words are we talking about?" Before Isabella could answer, David appeared in the doorway. He moved more slowly than usual, and she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Good morning, Isabella. I see you brought Sarah's journal. I stayed up all night reading it. David, her words are extraordinary. People need to hear what she had to say about love, about finding joy in simple moments. David sat down carefully in a nearby chair. She would be honored to know someone feels that way about her writing. Father Thomas looked between them curiously. "Would you two mind if I asked what this is about?" Isabella and David exchanged glances. David nodded, giving her permission to share. "David has entrusted me with his late wife's journal. It's filled with beautiful observations about life and love. It was his last wish that I find a way to share her words with others." Father Thomas's expression softened. "That's a beautiful gift, David. And Isabella, what an honor to be chosen for such a responsibility." "I want to do it right," Isabella said. "I want to make sure her words reach the people who need them most." Over the next few days, Isabella threw herself into the project with an energy she had never felt before. She contacted publishers, but they wanted to change Sarah's words, make them more commercial. She tried social media, but the posts felt too small for the depth of Sarah's writing. Then Father Thomas suggested something that changed everything. "Isabella, what if we started right here? What if you read some of Sarah's entries at our community dinners? Let the people hear her words first." Isabella looked uncertain. "I'm not good at public speaking. I've never done anything like that." David, who had been getting weaker each day, spoke up from his chair. "Sarah used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing something important despite the fear." That evening, Isabella stood nervously in front of 50 people in the community center's dining hall. She had never addressed a group like this before. These weren't wealthy donors at charity galas. These were real people with real struggles. She opened Sarah's journal and began to read. February 14th. "David forgot it was Valentine's Day, but he brought me coffee in bed like he does every morning. He doesn't know that this simple gesture means more to me than flowers or chocolates. Love lives in the everyday moments we choose to share." The room was completely silent. Isabella looked up and saw tears in several people's eyes. She continued reading. March 3rd. "We don't have much money, but we have each other. Today we walked through the park and pretended we owned the beautiful houses we passed. Then we went home to our tiny apartment and realized we already owned everything that mattered." When Isabella finished reading, the applause was unlike anything she had ever heard. It wasn't polite clapping from people who felt obligated. It was genuine appreciation from people who had been deeply moved. An elderly woman approached her afterward. "Miss, those words spoke directly to my heart. I lost my husband 5 years ago, and I had forgotten how beautiful our simple life together really was." A young mother wiped tears from her eyes. "I've been feeling sorry for myself, because we can't afford the things I see other families have. But those words reminded me that my children and I have something precious just in our love for each other." Isabella felt something shift inside her chest. This was what purpose felt like. Over the following weeks, word spread about Isabella's readings. More people began attending the community dinners just to hear Sarah's words. Isabella started visiting other shelters and community centers, sharing different entries that seemed right for each audience. David accompanied her whenever his health allowed, telling stories that brought context to Sarah's writing. He would explain the circumstances behind certain entries, helping people understand the deeper meaning in his wife's observations. But Isabella noticed David was fading. He moved slower, ate less, and sometimes had to stop mid-sentence to catch his breath. One afternoon, as they sat in the community center after Isabella had finished reading to a group of teenagers, David took her hand. "Isabella, I need to tell you something important." She saw the seriousness in his eyes. "What is it?" "I'm not going to be here much longer. Maybe a few weeks, possibly less." Isabella's throat tightened. "David, we should get you to a hospital. There has to be something. We've talked about this. I've made my peace with what's coming. But I need to know that you'll keep sharing Sarah's words after I'm gone." "Of course I will. But David, there has to be more we can do." David smiled weakly. "You've already done more than you know. You've given Sarah's words life again. You've shown me that her wisdom can still help people. That's all I ever wanted." Isabella felt tears building in her eyes. "You've given me something too. You've shown me what it means to have a real purpose. Then we've both been blessed." That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She walked through her penthouse, looking at all the expensive things that had once seemed so important. None of them mattered now. What mattered was the journal on her nightstand and the promise she had made to a dying man and his beloved wife. She sat down at her computer and began typing. If publishers wouldn't share Sarah's words the right way, she would find another path. She started with a simple blog post, sharing one of Sarah's entries along with the story of how she had met David. She wrote about learning that wealth meant nothing if it wasn't used to lift others up. The blog post was shared hundreds of times within hours. People began commenting, sharing their own stories of love and loss, of finding meaning in simple moments. Isabella realized she had discovered something more valuable than all her father's money. She had found her voice, and through David and Sarah, she had found her purpose. But David's time was running out faster than anyone expected, and what happened in his final days would test everything Isabella had learned about love, sacrifice, and the true meaning of wealth. The story that had begun with a homeless man's whispered plea was about to reach its most powerful moment. 3 days later, Isabella received the call she had been dreading. Father Thomas's voice was gentle but urgent over the phone. "Isabella, you need to come to the center right away. David collapsed this morning. The paramedics are here, but he's asking for you." Isabella's hands shook as she grabbed her keys. She drove faster than she ever had before, her mind racing with everything she wanted to say to David, everything she hadn't told him yet. When she arrived at St. Mary's, she found David on a stretcher in the main hall. The paramedics were preparing to move him to the ambulance. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes searched the room until they found hers. "Isabella," he whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. She took his hand in both of hers. "I'm here, David. I'm right here." The paramedic interrupted gently. "Ma'am, we need to get him to the hospital immediately. Are you family?" She looked at David, then back at the paramedic. "Yes, I'm his daughter." David's eyes widened slightly, but he squeezed her hand, understanding what she was doing. At the hospital, Isabella sat beside David's bed in the intensive care unit. The machines beeped steadily, and tubes delivered oxygen to help him breathe. The doctors had been honest. This was the end stage. David had maybe hours, not days. "Isabella?" David's voice was barely audible. "I need to tell you something about Sarah's journal. You need to rest. We can talk later." "No," he insisted with surprising strength. "There's more. Sarah didn't just write about our life together. She wrote letters." "What kind of letters?" "Letters to the person who would inherit her journal. She somehow knew that someone would carry her words forward after I was gone." Isabella felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "What do you mean?" "Check the back of the journal. There's a hidden pocket. She wrote letters specifically for you, even though she never knew who you would be." With trembling hands, Isabella opened the journal and felt along the back cover. There was indeed a small pocket, carefully sewn into the binding. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, each marked with different words. "For the one who will carry my words, for when you doubt your purpose, and for when I'm no longer here to guide you." Isabella stared at the envelopes. "David, this is impossible. How could she know? Sarah always said she could feel things others couldn't. She told me that her words would find the right person at the right time. She said love creates connections across time and space that we can't always understand." Isabella opened the first envelope with shaking hands. The letter was written in Sarah's familiar handwriting. "To the beautiful soul who has found these words, I don't know who you are, but I know why you're here. You've been searching for something real in a world full of empty things. David has told you our story, and now I want you to know yours. You were born to be a bridge between worlds, to take love from one place and plant it in another. Don't be afraid of the responsibility. Love multiplies when it's shared." Tears streamed down Isabella's face as she read. David watched her with peaceful eyes. "She knew," Isabella whispered. "She somehow knew exactly what I needed to hear." "Read the next one," David said softly. Isabella opened the second envelope. "For when you doubt your purpose, There will be moments when you wonder if you're doing enough, if you're worthy of carrying these words. Remember this: purpose isn't found in grand gestures. It's found in showing up day after day with an open heart. You don't need to save everyone. You just need to love everyone you meet exactly where they are. Isabella looked up at David through her tears. She's talking directly to me. How is this possible? David smiled weakly. Love finds a way. Sarah used to say that love is the only thing that survives death, the only thing that can reach across impossible distances. Isabella hesitated before opening the third envelope. She somehow knew this one would be the hardest to read. For when I'm no longer here to guide you. If you're reading this, it means David has kept his promise to find you. It means he trusted you with everything we held dear. Now I need you to trust yourself. Take our love story and help others find their own. Start with the broken people, the forgotten ones, the ones the world has given up on. They need to know that every life has value, that every story matters. You have everything you need to change the world, one heart at a time. David passed away peacefully that night, holding Isabella's hand as she read Sarah's words one final time. But his last wish lived on in ways neither of them could have imagined. Isabella used her father's resources to establish the Sarah and David Foundation, turning her penthouse into a publishing house dedicated to sharing stories of love, hope, and human connection. Sarah's journal became a best-selling book, with all proceeds funding shelters and community centers across the country. Every week, Isabella returned to St. Mary's, not as a wealthy volunteer, but as someone who had discovered that true riches come from lifting others up. She kept Sarah's journal with her always, reading entries to anyone who needed to hear that their story mattered, that love could be found in the smallest moments. The homeless man's whispered plea had transformed the millionaire's daughter into something she never expected to become. Not just someone with money, but someone with purpose. David's last wish hadn't just preserved Sarah's words, it had awakened Isabella's heart. Sometimes the most powerful gifts come wrapped in the most unlikely packages, and sometimes fulfilling someone else's last wish helps you find everything you never knew you were searching for.